of you, would you rise or stand with us? Start by singing together. Come gather round the mystery of love in our broken history, where grace heals the fault lines in me, time and time again, welcomes me into a house for the hungry, a well for the thirsty, where all saints come together, shoulder to shoulder, a welcome for the traveler, new wine for the vineyard, in all things God is able. Love has a bigger table. Show me who is my neighbor, the Christ hidden in the beggar. 'Cause love doesn't meet a stranger, love calls them friend, welcomes them into a house for the hungry, a well for the thirsty, where all saints come together, shoulder to shoulder, a welcome for the traveler, new wine for the vineyard, in all things God is able. Love has a bigger table. There's an empty seat. There's an empty seat waiting next to me. We gotta make some room for each other. Let my enemy be my family. Fill my cup till it's running over. There's an empty seat waiting next to me. We gotta make some room for each other. Let my enemy be my family. Fill my cup till it's running over. A house for the hungry, a well for the thirsty, where all saints come together, shoulder to shoulder, a welcome for the traveler, new wine for the vineyard, in all things God is able. Love has a bigger table. Love has a bigger table. Y'all sound great this morning. You can have a seat.
Morning. It is so good to be with you. It's so good to be with you on every Sunday morning, but especially on Sunday mornings that look like this. I don't want to jinx it, but it seems like spring has finally arrived. I hope it's not fool's spring here in Minnesota, but we're going to say that it's real spring. I'm going to address the giant elephant foot in the room. Because if you haven't already acknowledged it, I watched many of your eyes as I limped up here. I limped up here last week, right? I sprained my ankle on a long run last week. It is only a sprain, not a break, not a stress fracture or anything. It means that I have to miss a race in 2 weeks that I had been scheduled to run, but it means I have 6 weeks until my next race, the Grandma's Marathon in June. So I'm doing great. It looks It's obnoxiously large. It looks worse than it is, but just thought I would acknowledge it. My name's Jeremy, by the way. I'm the pastor here of the Grove Cottage Grove, and we are a brand new church that exists to grow goodness. That is why we do what we do, why we gather every Sunday and do this thing. And so we hope that every interaction that you have with us, whether you're in the room with us today for the first time, for the 100th time, whether you're watching us online or somehow interacting with us during the week, that interaction is somehow growing goodness within and through you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jordan. I'm one of the worship leaders here at the Grove, and I'd like to bring your attention to the worship handout that was given to you on your way in. On the inside, there is another little handout that you can give your information to us. Fill that out. Today is May 7th for the date on the top. And then on the back, there's a whole bunch of boxes. And those boxes are great opportunities for you to click the boxes that you're interested in finding more information about, and we'll be able to get that information to you. Also, kids are super valued here at the Grove. There's lots of great opportunities for them. So within the pews, you might notice that there's clipboards with activity sheets. Adults, these aren't just for kids. Off to the side, we have our little wiggle space where there's lots of quiet activities for kids to do while they're here in worship with us. We have Grove Kids, and they'll head out into the Commons in a little while. We'll sing a song to send them out. And if your kid is heading to Grove Kids for the first time, there's a little registration card within the pews, and we just ask that you fill that out in case we need to get in contact with you during. And then we also have a staffed nursery out in the Commons as well. So if you're interested in using those, that's from 6 weeks to 3 years.
Yeah. On the back of your worship handout, we have the 3 most important things. These are the things that we're really trying to hone in on and pay attention to as a church over the next month. If you're interested in all of the information about each of those things, you can go get that information now by scanning those QR codes. Otherwise, I will hit those at the end because we don't want to weigh you down with lots of information at the beginning. We really want to focus on why we're here, which is not about information. It's not about announcements. It is about making meaningful connections with God and one another. And so one of the ways that we do that within worship is we have a time called Connection Point, where in the middle of the service, rather than us continuing to talk at you, we give you the opportunity to talk to one another. I know it can be a little bit anxiety-producing maybe, especially if you're newer to the space. And so one of the things that we do, in addition to simply encouraging you to introduce yourself, share your name, is we provide you with a question that you can answer as you're having this interaction with the people around you. So the question for today is all about belonging. That's kind of the theme for the morning. So our question is, when is a time when you felt like you belonged? When is a time or a space when it was clear maybe you were new and it was clear from your first time being there that you were going to belong in that space? Or maybe it was a place where you were really comfortable, you've been there for a long time, and so you felt like you belong, or whatever your answer might be. So, again, we'll give you a couple minutes, stand up, find somebody next to you you don't know or don't know very well. Introduce yourself, and then you can discuss this question, and we'll reconvene in just a couple minutes. All right. Why don't you gently wrap up your discussions? It's a good thing when I can't get you to stop talking, right? There we go. Awesome. Well, we get to do something fun this morning, something that we have never done before. As a church, we are committed to welcoming, celebrating, encouraging every single person that comes through our doors, no matter who they are or no matter what they bring. We have a welcome statement that is one of the first things that you see on our website. One of the first things that you see when you walk through the door. It's on the front of our worship handouts. Every single person, we are committed wholeheartedly to welcoming, celebrating, and encouraging you as vital parts of this church. And there is something that as individuals who are a part of this church, you have an opportunity to make your own commitment to being a part of this church too, and the people who are a part of this church. And the way that we talk about that is partnership. And so a partner is someone who says, you know what, I'm not just someone who shows up randomly on a Sunday morning and is just taking it all in and receiving that commitment that the church is making to me. I am myself am committing to this thing as my church, as my church family. I'm committing to helping grow goodness alongside this church. And so we have been inviting partners for before we even started gathering for weekly worship a year and a half ago, and we continue to invite new people to come on as partners. And so what we're going to do today for the first time is we are going to celebrate some of our newest partners, have them come up here, introduce themselves. I didn't tell you this, partners. Can you? All you need to do is say your name. All you need to do is say your name. So what we're going to do is we will invite some of our newest partners up here. I will hand you the microphone. All you need to do is say your name. And then there are a list of questions that we have our partners answer. All you have to do is collectively say, I do or I will to them. And then there's a spot where we ask the rest of the congregation to respond and read something as well. Just as like a sign and a celebration of the commitment that you are making to this church and the people that you see all around you, and also the people who might be arriving next. Now, because we have done this or not done this before, I have this list of people that I reached out to and said, I would love for you to come up here and do this. If you are not among those people, but you're like, you know what, I want to be up there and make that acknowledgement too, you are welcome to come up here as well. Whether you are a newish partner or you made this commitment 2 years ago before we even started weekly public worship. If you want to come up here and make that commitment from the front too, and we get to celebrate you, totally fine with that, okay? So, at this point, I will invite those of you who I reached out to yesterday, who are our newest partners, to come join me up here. We can line up maybe along here. And then if you are not among those, but you're like, I want to use this as an opportunity to do that, awesome. And what we're going to stay to this side of this speaker, because if one of us steps in front of this speaker with the microphone, it's not going to end well. Feedback. If you want to come up on there, yeah, we're going to spread out across this whole area. All right. What we're going to do is I'm just going to hand you the microphone. All you got to do is say your name. That's all I'm going to ask of you. You can say your name, and then when we're done with that, we will have the list of questions that I'll read. You can just respond with I do or I will, depending on the question, and then we'll have it back to them. So I'll hand this to you, and you can hand it on down.
Haley.
Josh.
Claire and Sloan.
Rachel.
Ben.
Benetta.
Nathaniel.
Lonnie.
Maggie.
Grant.
Christine.
John.
Andrea.
Jude.
Nick.
Awesome. All right. Yeah. Let's give them a hand just for being up here and sharing your names, but also for the commitment that you are making to these people, to this church, and the people who are not yet here even. And so what we're going to do is we, again, have a list of questions. These are things that you are already doing, that you have already committed yourselves to, but now you are expressing them publicly for the first time. And then you as a congregation get to respond and make your own commitment back to them too. So here are the questions. I'm going to bring them up here. So, committing to a church is a response to the call of God through Jesus Christ, who has sent us to make disciples, to make other followers of Jesus, and form a community faithful to his mission, also known as a church. Becoming a partner in this ministry involves supporting the mission, vision, values, and leadership that help the Grove grow goodness. So, responding to God's expansive grace includes all people and all time. Do you place your trust in Jesus as the one who saves and liberates, thus choosing to follow his way? If so, say, I do. Do you accept the freedom and power God gives you to resist evil, injustice, and oppression in whatever forms they present themselves? As partners of this congregation, will you faithfully participate in its ministries by your prayers, your presence, your gifts, and your service? And because we are making this commitment together, people of the Grove, commend these persons to your love and care. Do all in your power to increase their faith, confirm their hope, and perfect them in love. And then you can read the italicized. We give thanks for all that God has already given you, and we welcome you in the love of Jesus. As people of the Grove, we join you in renewing our covenant to faithfully participate in the ministries of the church by our prayers, our presence, our gifts, and our service, that in everything God may be glorified through Jesus Christ. Partners, welcome. Church, welcome these new partners who are committed to you. You may take a seat now.
All right, so this is the part of the service where we'll usher our kids out to Grove Kids. If you're new here, we sing this kind of old familiar song as a way of sort of cheering on our kids as they go and reminding them of the love of God. We changed some of the lyrics so it's more inclusive, a little more modern. So it's Jesus loves the little children, every color, every shape, every type. They are precious in his sight. So we're celebrating all sizes, shapes, skin colors, abilities, identities, all of that stuff. So they're already out, but let's sing it anyways. Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world, every color, shape, and type, they are precious in his sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. Thank you.
So this is a little bit of a time for my family. This time of year specifically is a little bit of a strange time for my family with 3 young kids in the house. They get really used to holidays because we've got Thanksgiving, right? And then just a few weeks after Thanksgiving, we have Christmas, and then we have New Year's. And then there's these smaller holidays, but they're still like very participatory, and kids get really excited about them, like Valentine's Day and St. Patrick's Day. And then, of course, we have Easter. But then there's this weird lull after all of these big holidays where it's like a 3-month gap between Easter and 4th of July. And like my kids aren't really sure what to do with that gap in between. But there is another spring holiday that comes every year in the first week of May. May the 4th be with you, and also with you. I am the only real Star Wars fan in my household. It's a bit like being in a mixed religious household, where I get really excited about it. I do these fun things to get my kids excited about it, even though they don't really have any idea what's going on. And then my wife just kind of humors me a little bit. But it's something that I get really excited about. And there's something separate that happened this year, or is happening this year, that makes it a little bit bigger of a deal even. And it is that this month is the 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi. Woohoo! Which is the third of, technically the 6th episode, but the third movie that, it's complicated, right? This is the 40th anniversary. So one of the things that they've done is that in the week leading up to May the 4th, they released it in select theaters across the country for screenings, like in the movie theater, right? Well, our family isn't big on like going to the movies. We don't get to do it very often. When we do, it's always the kids' movies, right? We go to grown-up movies maybe once every couple of years, and definitely not at a time where a lot of these showings were. It's like it's got to be a huge event for us to be able to go to a movie. However, this was kind of a rough past week for me, and so I decided for a little bit of self-care on May the 4th, on Thursday, I was going to go to one of these screenings, and I was going to go by myself because it's something I needed. Greg Ball, I canceled our meeting because I was at Return of the Jedi. So I went by myself. I've only ever gone to another movie all by myself. Guess what? It was a Star Wars movie. It was Thursday, middle of the day. I went all by myself. It was a little bit like as I was walking in, I had this too, so as I was limping in, I was doing this a little bit, like I don't know necessarily I don't want to be seen, but I go into the theater, and it's not full. It's probably not even a quarter full, but there are other people there. And of course, the other people are mostly like middle-aged white dudes who are there by themselves in the middle of the day because they have the ability to be there in the middle of the day. But the thing is, like, I wasn't there alone, and they were not there alone. There were others of us who were there having this shared experience together. We didn't have to talk to each other because most of us, I will include me in this maybe, most of us probably didn't have the greatest social skills anyways to talk to people who are completely new to us. But even though we didn't have to talk to each other, we still had this shared experience. We didn't have to say, oh, this is reliving something important from my childhood. We didn't have to say, bear Ewoks that I pretend that aren't cool. We didn't have to say, did George Lucas ruin this with all the special edition stuff 26 years ago? It didn't matter because we were in that space together. Just that shared experience of being around each other. There was this sense of no matter where we were coming from, we had this place of belonging. We were not alone. We were doing something important together. Last month, we kicked off this series that we call the Ruck. Rucking is like this exercise where you carry a loaded up backpack, and it's a hiking exercise that is as much about the experience and who you become as a person doing the rucking as it is figuring out the exact destination. And what we've said is that following Jesus is a little bit like this. It's a little bit more about the person that you are becoming as a process of following Jesus. It's especially in community with other people than it is just saying, oh, I have a destination in mind. And as a church, the way that we have tried to talk about this, and we're increasingly talking about this as a pathway. So we've put together this Grove pathway where we said, okay, these shared experiences are important. So what are those shared experiences that we want everyone who calls the Grove their church home to have? So 2 weeks ago, we talked about welcome. It all begins with welcome, right? Like you're going into a state park where we have this shared experience together, you got to start with first showing up, right? And having that welcoming experience. And then there is the connection. Once you've shown up, you want to be able to explore a little bit. You want to be able to make connections with the place that you're in and the people that you're around, and figuring out how to do that systematically even. Well, then today we are talking about belonging, finding a campsite into which you can settle, and doing so alongside other people. Now, one of the things that as we were kind of crafting this in our minds that we were convinced of was that it is not just us as individuals in this space that are that ought to have this experience or having this experience. It's not necessarily even the people that you are closest to that have had this experience and need this experience of belonging as a church and as individual followers of Jesus. This is something that goes all the way back to the very first followers of Jesus, needing and prioritizing the experience of belonging. And we see this pretty prominently in the book of Acts, which is this book that appears right after the 4 biographies about the life of Jesus in the Bible. The story of Acts is like the story of the chaotic ruck that Jesus' earliest followers go on when he leaves them. So they've been following Jesus for years, 3 years. They've been following him, listening to everything that he does, trying to do everything that he says. And then Jesus dies, which is kind of a big deal. But then he comes back to life, which is kind of a big deal. But then he's about to head off again. And as he's about to head off, he gives them these final directions. And what he does is he takes out his keys to his mission, and he hands them off to them and says, all right, it's all on you. So the book of Acts, if you can kind of put the image in your head, is the earliest followers of Jesus opening up their hand, holding up the keys, being like, okay, I guess we go and figure this out together. Fortunately, we hear pretty early on that they are not alone in doing this, that Jesus doesn't just leave them hanging. So there's this story in the second chapter of Acts where the Holy Spirit comes. You can think of the Holy Spirit being the powerful personal presence of God. Even when Jesus is physically absent, this Holy Spirit comes, and it's like a rushing wind, and it lands on each of them like tongues of fire, which is a super weird way to talk about it. But what happens is these individual followers of Jesus are filled with this personal presence of God, and they have like this supernatural ability to go out and to be his representatives in the world. So they literally go out from this room onto the streets of Jerusalem, and they start talking. They start inviting people to understand what this way of Jesus looks like. One of them named Peter stands up in the crowd and starts sharing all of this stuff that he had not talked about before. And 3,000 people on that day, in that moment, are baptized. They become part of the church, become a part of this growing movement of people who are saying, we're committing ourselves to this way of following Jesus. This day is known as Pentecost. It's a big thing in church and in church history. But to be honest, I'm pretty skeptical of things like that. I'm pretty skeptical of events like that. These big tent revivals, you might even think of them as. I'm much more interested in okay, well, this big thing happened, this big public thing happened. How's this actually playing out in everyday life? Sure, you can make this big pronouncement, you can make this commitment in front of people, but what does this look like when you return home? Fortunately, we also get that in the book of Acts, and we get that story, or what that looks like. We get a snapshot of that immediately after this story where 3,000 people are baptized. So this part of the story happens, again, immediately afterwards, Acts 2, verses 42 through 47. They, these early followers of Jesus, were devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Reverential awe came over everyone, and many wonders and miraculous signs came about by the apostles. All who believed were together and held everything in common, and they began selling their property and possessions and distributing the proceeds to everyone as anyone had need. Every day they continued to gather together by common consent in the temple courts, breaking bread from house to house, sharing their food with glad and humble hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of all the people. And the Lord was adding to their number every day those who were being saved. So if you have a modern smartphone, a lot of these new smartphones have multiple different cameras on the back, different lenses, and you can choose, each of those lenses does something different, right? And one of them might be like a wide angle lens, and then there's another that might be a telephoto lens, which is like a zoom. You can think of this part of the story almost like the author of Acts having just taken this big wide angle picture that he's using, and it's going to the focus. It's going to the telephoto. Yes, there's this big event that happens where 3,000 people become followers of Jesus. But then as they move on, as they go back to their homes and everyday life, he moves to the telephoto lens, and it's, okay, well, what does this look like when they go back home? What is the experience that it's out of the public eye? And so he lays that out. And what happens is, we see that as they go back home, they don't just necessarily go back to their everyday lives as it was. They go about their everyday lives, but what they do is they continue to gather in the temple courts. They gather regularly for worship together because they're committed to each other. They gather in their homes. They talk about the teachings of what it means, what it looks like to follow the way of Jesus in the world. They care for one another. They make sure everyone has what they need. They share meals together. They share their possessions. Oh, this person is going without this thing. Well, I have extra of this thing, more than I need, so I want to make sure that the person who doesn't have that thing has their needs met. They're making sure that everyone is feeling connected, everyone has what they need, everyone belongs. And at the end, it's tagged on that it is not just for them. It is not just for the group that already exists, that all of their needs are being met, that they are finding this place of belonging. As it adds at the end, as they continue to do this, as they go about this normal, everyday way of following Jesus alongside other people, they're creating a space of belonging for the people who have not arrived next. And it's not this big, grand, big tent revival, but as they're doing these normal, everyday things and creating a space for belonging, more and more people are finding a new place to belong and are being invited into this thing as well. And the mission, the following of Jesus continues to grow as a result, in some ways, bigger and faster and more sustainably than any big events could do. I find it much more compelling to think about small tent renewal than big tent revival. And I know that's a little bit ironic on a day when we've talked about this day being Pack the Place Sunday. We've tried to get as many people who are committed to this being their church together in the same room at the same time, and bringing people up here and making this public acknowledgement, right, of this commitment that people are making to this church and to you. The irony of that is not lost on me. But like the big public gathering of each other is important in order that we might then go out and have those smaller tent places of renewal and belonging as well. There's only so much that we can do in an hour on Sunday morning. There's only so much connection that you can have with one another on a Sunday morning for an hour. There's only so much that I can talk. Well, I could talk for more than probably 20 minutes, but there's only so much talking I can do and so much talking that you can hear and process from me, right? There's only so much that you can continue to experience of this music and being able to be in that worshipful environment that Katie leading us into. There's all 100 and I don't know the math, 160 some hours a week that you are not in this place. And so what is it going to look like the rest of that time, the rest of that week? It's going to be that small tent renewal where you are able to connect and find belonging with other people, right? One of the primary ways that we try to do this is through growth groups. Back in the heat of the pandemic, middle of 2020, when there was so much isolation, so much loneliness, we said, we need to get people together. We need to connect them to one another so that they can find a place where they can belong and have their needs met and process this ruck together. The ruck of following Jesus, but also the ruck of everyday life. And so we created these things when we weren't able to gather. As the Grove, Cottage Grove, we had not yet gathered in public yet. It would be another year and a half before we did public worship services. We said Grove groups are going to be the place where that real place of belonging can be. And one of the things that we said from the get-go, one of the things that I was especially insistent on was that these weren't going to be closed groups. They were going to be groups where there was an opening. Intentionally, there was an opening that we provided, acknowledging that there will be people who arrive next, and we need to make space for them to belong as well. I want to acknowledge that Grove groups are not perfect. This is the pastor speaking. I'm in a Grove group. I lead a Grove group. Guess how many times our full Grove group has met together over the last 6 months? Grove group, how many times have we all met together over the last 6 months? 0. There has not been a single time in the last 6 months when all of us have got together because the ruck of everyday life is hard. The logistics of everyday life are hard. And yet, there have been times when we have been able to get together in different pockets at different times. We have figured out how to navigate that. And if nothing else, we know that when the nastiness of everyday life, the ruck of following Jesus, or the ruck of just like navigating life in this chaotic world comes up, that when those things come up, we know who to go to because we know where we truly belong. I imagine that if you are already in a Grove group, you have experienced many of those things too. None of your Grove groups are perfect, sorry. None of your Grove groups are perfect because none of us are perfect, and this world is not perfect, but if nothing else, they provide that context, that place for where belonging can happen. We would love for every single person who is a part of this church to be in a Grove group, to be able to find that intentional space of belonging. But maybe that's not it for you. Maybe you can't logistically figure that out in your ruck of everyday life. And so we try to formulate everything that we do around the church to create spaces for belonging. Maybe one of the ways that you belong is that you make a commitment like the people up here did today, and that you say, you know what, I'm committed to this being my church. I'm committed to you all out there. And one of the ways that I belong is like diving in by making that commitment. Maybe one of the ways that you find a place of belonging is that you get involved. You find a place where you can use your gift and passions alongside other people to do what you do really well. And that can be encouraging to you. That can be a place of belonging for you, but can also create a place of belonging for other people. Or maybe it is simply in your showing up. Maybe the way that you belong is simply to show up and trust that that space is being made available, because we try to work really hard to make that space being available for everyone and anyone who walks through these doors. And if that is the way that you find your belonging, we are not only willing, but we are longing to help you find that place where you can belong. There's an open spot at the campsite, and we would love to be able to ruck alongside you. So wherever you find yourself today, however you entered this room today, my hope and my prayer is that you know that you belong, you know that you are loved, that you are valued, and that we can extend together that sense of belonging, not only to the people who are already here, but also to the people who are arriving next. So may that be so. In just a moment, we are going to move into a time that is known as communion. In other traditions, it might be known as the Lord's Supper or as the Eucharist. But this is one of the things in the church that we do to kind of put skin on the things that we are talking about. It is one of the sacraments of the church. And a sacrament simply means it is a tangible sign of experiencing the grace of God, which might not otherwise be experienced. This goes back to, it is a retelling of an old story of when Jesus was with his earliest followers in his last moments, the night before he was betrayed and killed. He gathered with his closest followers to share a meal. And over the course of this meal, he set this table. He invited these people who had dedicated themselves to following him, who were by no means perfect. All of them in some capacity over the next 24 hours would abandon him. One of them would be the people who would turn him over to be arrested and killed. And yet he set this table for them and said, this is a table where you are invited to belong. And he invited them to continue to do this thing over and over again and continue to make their own tables of belonging as well, where people could be invited into this thing and the experience of what it meant to follow Jesus in everyday life. So he took this loaf of bread and he broke it and he said, imagine this is my body, which is given for you. Yes, you and all of you. Do this as often as you eat it in remembrance of me. And then he also took a cup. And he said, imagine this is my blood, which is poured out for you. Yes, you, but all of you. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For when you do these things over and over again, you remember what I've done for you. You remember what I'm doing for you. You remember that you belong and that you are called to create a place of belonging as well. So in just a moment, we are going to invite you up here to participate in this. We have these single serving cups, and when you come up, we will say a quick blessing for you and then hand this over to you. You can then return to your seats. There's 2 layers of film. The first layer gets you to this wafer, not a loaf of bread, it's a wafer. It is gluten-free, so if you have that need, you do not have to worry about it. And then you can rip off the next layer, and it is grape juice underneath there. So if you are in recovery, you are welcome to participate as well. And one of the things that we practice here as a church and in our tradition is that you do not have to be a member of our church in order to participate in this. You do not have to be a member of any church to participate in this. You do not have to have it all figured out. You do not have to be an adult with all of the answers, as if the adults have all of the answers. This is truly an act of belonging. This is a table of belonging that Jesus set for his followers and that we set for one another. And so in just a moment, we will invite you to come down and participate. Jordan, why don't you come up here? So when you are ready, you can come down.
Bring your weary bones, tired from the load. There's rest for you here. Bring your hurting heart that's been emptied and scarred. There's nothing to fear. It's been so good to be with you all today. I want to sing together one more time, and we're bringing back a song that we did a lot when we first started meeting for worship in this room, when the pandemic was still kind of happening and we were still masked, and this was sort of an anthem for us. And it's very appropriate for today. So if you know this song from last year or just it's such a great song by the Highwomen. We'd love for you to sing along, and if you don't know it, we would love for you to try anyways. So let's rise together one more time, and we'll close out with this. You can hold my hand when you need to let go. I can be your mountain when you're feeling valley low. I can be your street light, showing you the way home. You can hold my hand when you need to let go. And I want a house with a crowded table and a place by the fire for everyone. Let us take on the world while we're young and able, and bring us back together when the day is done. Well, if we want a garden, we're gonna have to sow the seeds, plant a little happiness, let the roots run deep. If it's love that we give, then it's love that we reap. If we want a garden, we're gonna have to sow the seeds. And I want a house with a crowded table and a place by the fire for everyone. Let us take on the world while we're young and able, and bring us back together when the day is done. The door is always open, your picture's on my wall. Everyone's a little broken, and everyone belongs. Everyone belongs. And I want a house with a crowded table and a place by the fire for everyone. Let's take on the world while we're young and able, and bring us back together when the day is done. Bring us back and bring us back together when the day is done.
Joked in our pre-service meeting that we're going to have this huge song, and then I'm going to have to come up and do the announcements and be the killjoy, bring it all back down. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to hit a bunch of information on the announcements. Here's the 3 things you need to know. 1, we're moving outdoor for worship every single week starting on May 28th. Woohoo! Something to be excited about. Pride Sunday is happening June 11th. We hope that you will come for that. We hope you will invite people to that. It's like our second Easter. It was our second biggest service of the year last year. If you want to help participate in that service or planning of that service, talk to Katie afterwards. And then also on May 28th is Bring Your Pet to Church Sunday. Any type of pet is welcome as long as it will not eat another pet or will easily be eaten by another pet. That is our only caveat, okay? Our only caveat. You know, as I was thinking about today, and even as I was in the back listening, I think about the experience of church for so many people and how it is often a place where you got to check your stuff before you walk through the doors. Or it is, if you don't check your stuff, then it is a place of exclusion. And so my hope, and it seems like, I'll even speak for myself, the fact that we are growing this thing where you can belong just as you are. You can find a place where you can be celebrated and encouraged just as you are. It's deeply meaningful to me. And the fact that we get to celebrate the people who are making the commitment to that church and that type of vision is deeply meaningful too. And I hope that it's deeply meaningful to all of you. As we go from here today, there's one more packing opportunity. We are packing kits for moms in our community that are going to be distributed by Sawashko Cares. Thank you for all of you who assembled, went out and bought those products that are going to be a part of those kits. As you go out from here, you can help to assemble those. We also have like several different types of cake and cheesecake and all sorts of other goodies out there too, and coffee, of course. And so even as the worship gathering comes to an end, just know that as you walk out from this room, there's a place for you to belong alongside other people out there as well. With all of that, you're already standing. I'll have you extend your hands to receive this blessing as we go. Whoever you are and however you arrive in this room today, may you know that you belong. And may you extend that feeling of belonging to the people who are arriving next. May that be so.